This is the story of an old riddler, Pierre de Fermat, who scribbled a mathematical puzzle in the margin of a book that baffled the best mathematicians for 356 years. It became Fermat's last theorem. It's also a tale of determination of a professor at Princeton, Andrew Wiles, who tackled his childhood dream and resolved one of the greatest unsolved problems in the annals of pure logic.
I love these big problems, I have to admit. You always face the risk with these big problems that there simply may not be the right mathematics around in your century to make it a solvable problem. So you have to have the faith that you can solve that problem.
Fermat's last theorem is a deceptively simple equation that a child of 10 could understand. Because it's related to another theorem that children learn in geometry in school. The square of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares on the other two sides. Pythagoras, the ancient Greek genius, discovered all right-angled triangles obeyed this rule. There was an infinite number of whole number equations that obeyed this rule, like this one, when all three whole numbers were squared. In 1637, Pierre de Fermat, a French jurist and amateur mathematician, proposed that if you gave the numbers in the equation the power of 3 or higher, nowhere in the infinite universe of numbers was there a whole number solution. In this example, the sum of the two cubes is 728, one short of the third cube, 729. Then Fermat scribbled a remark in the margin of a textbook that turned this proposition into the mathematics' holy grail. I have a truly marvelous demonstration of this proposition, which this margin is too narrow to contain. Perhaps it should have been called Fermat's lost theorem, because he lived another 30 years and never shared his truly marvelous proof with anyone before dying in 1665. Many mathematicians have shared a faith that a proof for the theorem could be written, and many have tried. But to satisfy the strict tenets of mathematics, a proof had to show the theorem had no solutions, not in a million examples, or even a billion examples, but no solutions in the endless universe of numbers. Andrew Wiles also had the faith he could tackle Fermat from an early age, where he grew up in Cambridge.
The first time I tried to solve it was when I was 10 years old. I found the statement of the theorem and the problem in a book that I found in the local public library, and I took it home and I just loved the problem.
That early passion for maths was encouraged by Wiles' parents. His father, Morris, was a theology professor who taught at both Oxford and Cambridge, but he also shared his son's passion for hard problems.
He'd always loved puzzles. He always did crossword puzzles and some number puzzles, and in fact, during the war he'd been involved in code breaking, so he understood the challenge of unsolved problems.
Wiles finished undergraduate studies at Oxford, and then in 1975 he attended Cambridge University at Clare College. But he chose not to study the Fermat problem, fearing he'd be wasting his time.
Since roughly the middle of the 19th century, there hadn't been a significant new way of looking at the problem until 1986.
Andrew Wiles came to Princeton in 1981, but it would be another 5 years before he would realize in a flash, while sipping iced tea, that he could finally pursue his life's dream. He was drinking that iced tea with friends when he overheard that another mathematician had linked Fermat's last theorem with something called the Shimura-Taniyama conjecture. As a consequence of this complex link, Wiles knew if he could prove the conjecture, he would also prove that Fermat's last theorem had no solutions.
It wasn't just a wild goose chase. It wasn't. Something would come of it, because I'd be working on a new area that had to have some things proved about it, even if you didn't get all the way to Fermat.
But Andrew Wiles would have to write a massive proof, hundreds of pages long, that could take years of work to show that Shimura Taniyama was true.
The statement of this other problem is to relate two kinds of equations that show up in mathematics, the ones that come from what are called elliptic curves, which had been studied since the 19th century, and another form that also been studied since the 19th century called modular curves, but which for the first 80 years of their existence had seemed completely unrelated.
He would have to bridge no less than two separate islands in the world of mathematics. Wiles began to work on Shimura Taniyama immediately. Only his wife and children knew he was working every day on a brain-crunching proof to solve not one, but now two very difficult math problems that most people would never understand. As he moved among his friends and colleagues, Wiles kept his secret, always thinking about the proof, but saying nothing to anyone.
Mathematicians get up in the morning and go to a table with a piece of paper, and they hope that they have some inspiration. It's like stumbling around in the dark, where you can feel little parts. You get some feeling for the walls, for the barriers, some feeling for where you can move forward. You just don't know when illumination is going to come, when you're going to have a flash of insight that's going to show you, yes, you can get into another level.
After 7 years of private toil, he finished his proof and finally shared it with the world. Cambridge, England, 1993, at the Isaac Newton Institute. The numerati of the math world gathered to witness Wiles' lecture of his solution. It took him 3 days of lecturing to explain his proof, but he finally finished. Fermat's last theorem was apparently solved. He spent the summer of 1993 correcting minor errors spotted by other mathematicians. But one day he received an email about another error. At first it also seemed minor, but by the fall, Wiles saw he had misinterpreted a part of the intricate logic in the proof. Had he been going in circles? Was Andrew Wiles' race for an answer to Fermat a wild goose chase after all? It took him a year to work out a solution to the error with the help of a former graduate student. The final version of the proof, 120 pages long, was finished in his office at Princeton, October 1994.
I kept going over it to see I wasn't deluding myself. Then I would go out, walk around the department, come back and check it was still there. And I took it home that night. It was hard to write out all the details because I was so excited.
What impact will the proof of the century have outside mathematics?
In mathematics, it's always our experience that these techniques are used in other fields, but it's almost always unpredictable. Elliptic curves, modular curves, these are used now for encoding information that's transmitted over the internet, for protecting your security.
As chairman of Princeton's mathematics department, Wiles will continue to work expanding the knowledge of the science. And why did a math professor from Princeton manage to do what so many others had failed to do for centuries?
Perhaps what one needs to solve a mathematical problem that's as hard as this is some kind of faith. If you don't have that faith, how could you spend year after year of our finite lives actually wrestling with this one problem. So you have to have faith.
But did Fermat actually have a truly marvelous proof? Or was his marginal note just a practical joke by an old riddler? The theorem is finally solved, but is there a final mystery waiting to be uncovered in the story of Fermat's last theorem?